In 2004, a hedge fund manager named Eddie Lampert appeared on the cover of BusinessWeek. The headline called him the Next Warren Buffett. He had made over $1 billion in a single year, the first Wall Street manager in history to do so. He was Yale educated and a member of Skull and Bones. His Yale roommate was Steve Mnuchin, later the United States Treasury Secretary. He owned a 288-foot luxury yacht named Fountainhead, after the Ayn Rand novel celebrating capitalists as Darwinian supermen. And in 2005, he took control of Sears, the greatest retailer America had ever produced. At Sears' peak in early 2007, Sears had a market cap of nearly $30 billion. Amazon was worth half that. 14 years later, Sears filed for bankruptcy with $10.4 billion in losses. 175,000 people had lost their jobs. According to creditors, Lampert allegedly stripped $2 billion from the company during its decline. He denies every allegation. This is that story. Eddie Lampert didn't just arrive on Wall Street. He stormed in and rewrote the rules. By his mid-30s, Lampert had already made history, running ESL investments out of Greenwich and posting $1 billion profit in a single year. That feat put him on the cover of BusinessWeek in 2004, crowned as the next Warren Buffett. The magazine's headline wasn't just hype. Lampert's hedge fund managed over $15 billion at its peak, and his personal network ran deep. At Yale, he joined Skull and Bones and roomed with Steve Mnuchin, a connection that would later echo from the Sears boardroom all the way to the US Treasury. Lampert's tastes matched his ambition. He commissioned a 288-foot super yacht and named it Fountainhead, a nod to Ayn Rand's celebration of the self-made capitalist. The yacht became a floating symbol of his philosophy and his power. Behind the scenes, whispers about his intensity and his absolute control followed him everywhere. In the rarefied circles of Greenwich, stories circulated about his near-mythic focus and, according to some reports, a harrowing abduction that only added to the legend. But it was the numbers that really turned heads. In early 2007, Sears Holdings, under Lampert's direction, reached a market value close to $30 billion, nearly double Amazon's at the time. For a brief moment, it looked as if the old guard of American retail, guided by a Wall Street prodigy, might outpace the digital future. Lampert had the capital, the connections, and the confidence of someone who had never been told no. No one, it seemed, could tell him otherwise. For generations, Sears wasn't just a store, it was a fixture in the lives of American families. Each year, the arrival of the Sears catalogue was an event. Children pored over its pages, circling toys for Christmas, while parents mapped out back-to-school wardrobes and home repairs. The catalogue reached millions of mailboxes, connecting rural towns and bustling cities to the same universe of goods. In Chicago, the Sears Tower soared above the skyline, the tallest building in the world when it opened in 1973. Its name stood for ambition and American scale, a monument to the company's reach. At its height, Sears accounted for nearly 1% of the entire United States GDP, a single retailer moving as much money as some countries. For the middle class, Sears was a promise that you could furnish a home, buy a washing machine, or start a new life, all under one roof. The brand's logo was stitched onto work shirts and wedding gifts, its return policy legendary for fairness. To dismantle Sears wasn't just to shutter another business. It meant erasing a piece of the American story, one order form, one storefront at a time. Inside Sears glass towers, a new order took hold. Lampert divided the company into 30 fiercely independent business units, including appliances, tools, and apparel. Each one became a rival. He called it an experiment in pure meritocracy, inspired by the pages of Ayn Rand. Store managers remember the shift as sudden and bewildering. Overnight, colleagues became competitors. Each unit fought for its own budget, set its own prices, and guarded its own data. Cooperation faded. If the paint department needed a loan from hardware, it had to justify every dollar. sometimes with interest. Lampert rarely left his Florida office, relying on spreadsheets and remote video calls to monitor the chaos. Decisions that once happened on the store floor now ran through layers of bureaucracy, with managers pitted against each other for resources and recognition. Internal memos described a world where success meant outmaneuvering your peers, not serving the customer. One executive recalled, "It was like running 30 startups under one crumbling roof." This structure, designed to reward the strongest, instead left Sears fractured and vulnerable. As the company splintered, it became easier to carve out and sell off assets, one unit at a time. The seeds of Sears' unraveling were sown in the name of radical efficiency, but the human cost was only beginning to surface. In 2015, a new entity appeared on the balance sheet, Seritage Growth Properties. On paper, it looked like a lifeline. Sears transferred 266 of its most valuable stores, prime real estate in cities and suburbs, into this freshly minted real estate trust. The deal brought in $2 billion, cash that Sears used to pay down debt and keep the lights on. But the mechanics favoured those holding the levers. Eddie Lampert, as both architect and sponsor, designed a structure where Sears became a tenant in buildings it once owned, now paying rent to a company he controlled. Lease terms included rent escalations and redevelopment options that let Seritage raise rents or reclaim properties for other uses. Over time, what looked like a rescue drained Sears resources, store by store. A year earlier, the Land's End brand had been spun off. Official filings show Sears received a mix of cash and convertible notes, but the fair value appraisal put the loss to the parent company at nearly $4 billion. Creditors would later allege these transactions were engineered to shift value out of reach, out of the hands of employees and retirees, and into entities Lampert could influence. In court filings, they pointed to the $2 billion real estate shift as the centerpiece of their claim. Lampert, for his part, called the moves necessary and above board. Through it all, the 90,000 pensioners watched from the sidelines, their future tied to a company that now owned less and owed more. Across the country, the decline of Sears played out in slow motion. One flickering light, one leaking roof, one empty aisle at a time. Employees who had spent decades on the floor watched the stores they called home fall into disrepair. Shelves sat half-stocked, registers went unmanned, and the sense of pride that once defined a Sears job faded into embarrassment. Maria Gonzalez, a former sales associate in Cleveland, described the heartbreak of walking past buckets catching water from a ceiling that no one came to fix. She remembered the day her pension statement arrived. The numbers didn't add up. For years, Sears had promised security. Suddenly, that promise looked fragile. When bankruptcy filings landed in October 2018, the shock rippled far beyond the boardroom. The company owed $43 million in pension payments it could no longer guarantee. While managers scrambled to keep the lights on, the board approved $25 million in executive bonuses, money that for many felt like a final insult. The Pension Benefit Guaranty Corporation stepped in, announcing it would take over the plans for 90,000 retirees. For some, that meant a check from the government, smaller than expected, stripped of health coverage, and with no explanation but a form letter. Outside shuttered stores, former workers gathered in the cold, holding signs that asked how a company could reward its executives while leaving its own people behind. The cost of financial engineering was no longer theoretical. It was measured in lost homes, broken routines, and the quiet dignity of a paycheck that would never come again. In March 2024, the story of Sears entered a new phase, not behind closed doors, but in a federal courtroom. The bankruptcy estate filed a sweeping lawsuit against Eddie Lampert and a circle of former insiders, naming Steve Mnuchin as a co-defendant. The complaint did not mince words. It alleged that Lampert, Mnuchin, and their associates orchestrated a series of transactions that moved more than $2 billion in assets out of Sears and into entities they controlled. The suit described a pattern: real estate deals, spin-offs, and loans that, according to the filing, left Sears hollowed out, while insiders collected fees, rents, and interest. Steve Mnuchin's name on the docket raised eyebrows well beyond Wall Street. Once Lampert's college roommate and later a board member at Sears, Mnuchin had gone on to serve as United States Treasury Secretary. Now he faced a $177 million claim as part of the bankruptcy litigation. For the creditors and the 90,000 pensioners watching the proceedings, the legal battle was about more than numbers on a spreadsheet. It was about whether the law would hold powerful men accountable for the collapse of a company that had once anchored American life. Lampert's legal team called the allegations baseless, insisting every transaction was done at fair market value and with full board approval. But the case, as filed in federal court, laid bare the mechanics of financial engineering and the human cost left in its wake. Today, the line between Wall Street strategy and Main Street consequence blurs more than ever. Hedge fund logic still shapes American icons, and ordinary workers still bear the fallout. The real cost isn't measured in lost brands, but in futures quietly rewritten. What happens when finance becomes the business itself?